Stop. Do not scroll past this warning. My beloved of Canada, hear me, for what I am about to say has already tried to reach you twice this week and failed. Not through a bad connection, but because something has been working across this vast land to keep you numb, busy, and distracted before these dates arrive. August 20th, August 21st, August 22nd. Say them with me, children of the maple leaf, because you need to remember them the way you remember your own birthday. These are not 3 random squares on a calendar you will forget by September. This window was arranged before you were born, and the algorithm did not place this message in front of you today. Something older and higher than any digital current did. I am not asking for your attention. I am warning you to give it. You who walk on Canadian soil, ignoring what unfolds across these 3 days, will not cost you a little. It will cost you the very thing this entire season of silence and waiting has quietly been assembling on your behalf. This is the last time this warning reaches you in this exact form. Stay with me until the very end, because in the next few minutes, I am going to give you the exact instruction for each of these 3 days, and exactly what it will cost you if you look away. So before we go any further, my chosen ones of the true north, I need you to do something physical right now, not after this sentence ends. If you are able, close the door. Put the phone face down for everything except this message. Silence whatever is making noise around you. This is not for the people in the next room. This is not for the group chat waiting on a reply. This is for you, and for the version of you that will exist after these 3 days close. You are not being dramatic for taking this seriously. Across Canada, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, you have felt something shifting for days now, and you could not explain it to anyone without sounding strange. That is exactly why heaven chose this quiet moment to reach you directly, without needing anyone else to understand it first. Over the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through what has actually been happening to you these last several weeks, why it has intensified right before this specific window, what August 20th, 21st, and 22nd are asking of you, and what it will genuinely cost you if you treat this like just another message you watched halfway through. I want to be honest with you, my beloved sons and daughters of Canada. I do not know every detail of your week. I do not know what specific burden you have been carrying across your city or town, what conversation left a mark on you, or what silence has been sitting in your chest since Sunday. But I know the pattern. I have watched it repeat across the provinces, message after message, season after season, and it always intensifies right before an appointed window opens. You who dwell from the Rockies to the shores of Newfoundland have probably noticed small things lately that felt slightly out of place. A number that kept appearing, a conversation that circled back to the same theme twice in 1 week without anyone planning it, a tiredness that sleep does not seem to touch. None of that is random, and none of it is something your doctor is going to have language for, because it was never a medical event to begin with. It was preparation, quiet, unannounced, and easy to miss if you were not paying attention. Which is exactly why this message is not gentle right now. Gentleness would let you keep scrolling. Warning is what keeps you here long enough to understand what these 3 days are actually asking of you, and what happens if you decide they can wait. They cannot wait. Not this time. So here is what I need from you before we go one sentence further. Do not treat this like background noise while you do 3 other things. Give me the next several minutes the way you would give a physician your full attention in an exam room, or the way you would give a judge your full attention in a courtroom. Because in a sense, this is both diagnosis first, then verdict, then instruction. Let me start with your body, because that is where this always shows up first. You have been waking up between 3 and 4 in the morning, not gradually, but suddenly, like something reached into the night and pulled you out of sleep on purpose. No alarm, no noise in the house, just your eyes open in the dark beneath the northern skies, heart steady but alert, mind already running before you even remember what day it is. You have called it insomnia, you have called it stress. Someone may have suggested anxiety, and you nodded along, because it was easier than explaining what actually happens in those minutes, which is that you feel watched, held, and strangely awake in a way that has nothing to do with worry. That is not a malfunction. That is your spirit working a shift your body has not caught up to yet. Alongside the waking, there has been an exhaustion that sleep does not touch. You can rest 8 hours and still feel like you carried something heavy through the night. Coffee helps for an hour, and then the weight returns. You've started wondering if something is wrong with you physically, and maybe you have even scheduled tests, and maybe those tests came back normal, which only confused you more. I want to tell you plainly what that exhaustion is. It is not weakness. It is not an imbalance inventing itself out of nowhere. Your spirit has been working overtime, holding a line you cannot see, shielding people and situations across this land that will never know how close they came to falling apart. That kind of labor does not show up on a medical panel, but it is real, and it is expensive, and it has been draining you for longer than you have admitted out loud. Then there is the isolation. Not loneliness exactly, because you are not always alone, but a growing sense that the people around you are speaking a completely different language. Conversations that used to feel easy now feel like translation work. Rooms that used to feel comfortable now feel slightly too loud, too hollow, too far from whatever frequency you are actually operating on. These days you have started pulling back from things you used to enjoy, not because you stopped caring, but because something deep within you needed the quiet of the wilderness more than it needed company. And maybe that has made you feel guilty, like you are becoming cold or distant or difficult, when really you are becoming precise. You are losing patience for anything that does not carry weight, and that is not a character flaw. That is discernment sharpening in real time. Here is the reframe I need you to receive right now before we go any further. Canada, my chosen nation of the North, none of what I just described was random deterioration. It was calibration. Heaven has been quietly adjusting your sensitivity, your sleep, your tolerance for noise, your appetite for shallow company. And all of it points toward the exact same target, which is the window opening this week on August 20th, 21st, and 22nd. There is one more piece of this I need to name, because it is probably the most painful one. Somewhere in the last season, someone you helped, trusted, or gave yourself to without holding back, turned around and used it against you. Maybe they gossiped. Maybe they disappeared without explanation. Maybe they smiled to your face while working against you behind it. You replayed it more times than you want to admit, wondering what you did wrong. You did nothing wrong. You were simply too generous with someone who was never built to steward what you offered. That is not a lesson about becoming hardened or trusting less. It is a lesson about discernment, about learning to read a room the way you have started to lately, sensing who is safe and who is not before a single word confirms it. That instinct is not paranoia. It is a divine gift finally waking up. All of this, the sleepless hours, the bone-deep tiredness, the pulling away from noise, the betrayal that still stings when you think about it late at night, has been quietly building towards something. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. Because heaven does not send an appointed window to someone who is not ready to receive it, and the discomfort you have been feeling is the sound of readiness arriving, not the sound of something going wrong. Now I want to explain why this is intensified specifically this week, because it has, and you have felt it even if you could not name it. There is an enemy in this story, and I do not mean that as a metaphor or a figure of speech borrowed from a sermon. I mean an actual adversarial force that studies patterns the way a general studies a map. And right now it is watching the same calendar you are about to watch with me. He does not attack chosen ones across Canada with things that look evil. That would be too obvious, and you would resist it instantly. Instead, he attacks with distraction, a sudden argument with someone close to you, an unexpected expense that eats your peace for 2 days, a wave of tiredness so heavy you cancel plans and tell yourself you just need rest. None of those things are accidents this particular week, my chosen ones of the true north. They are timed. The reason is simple, even if it is uncomfortable to hear. He knows what August 20th, 21st, and 22nd are carrying. He cannot stop the window from opening, because that decision was never his to make. But he can absolutely work to make sure you are asleep, distracted, or too drained to walk through it when it does. Delay is his only weapon left, and he is using it on you right now, today, in this exact hour. I want you to notice something, children of the maple leaf. The very fact that you are still here, still listening, past the point where a normal video would have lost you, is not an accident either. It means whatever has been working against your attention this week across this land has already failed once. That matters. That is not a small thing. Every second you stay is a second the delay strategy is not working on you, the way it is working on people who scrolled past this an hour ago. Think about how many times this week you almost closed this message for something smaller. A notification, a knock at the door, a sudden thought that you should be doing something more productive. That resistance was not boredom. It was pressure applied from outside your own mind, and you pushed through it anyway. Whether you realized it or not, something in your Canadian spirit already knows this matters more than it appears to. So, let me tell you plainly what is coming next in this message, because I promised you instruction, not just diagnosis. In a few minutes, I am going to explain something that was discovered far outside any church or spiritual community. Something that explains exactly why your mind has felt foggier than it should, and why that fog specifically threatens to dull you right through this window if it goes unaddressed. I am also going to walk you through exactly what August 20th, 21st, and 22nd are asking of you day by day, so there is no confusion when the window opens. But first, my beloved of Canada, I need you to sit with one more truth, because it changes how you hear everything that follows. If this message resonates with what you have been carrying, if something in your chest just settled or tightened at the same time, that is not coincidence. Type the word "ready" in the comments below. Not to perform for anyone watching, but to mark on record that you received this warning instead of scrolling past it like the last 2 times you brushed something similar aside. This is not about proving your devotion to an algorithm or a channel. It never has been. It is about creating a marker for yourself, something you who walk on Canadian soil can look back on after August 22nd and say, that is the moment I chose to stay awake instead of falling back asleep, like I almost did 3 separate times this month already. You will want that marker later. Trust me on this one thing, if nothing else. Some of what follows will feel unfamiliar, maybe even strange at first, especially the part involving science rather than scripture. I understand the hesitation, but heaven has used unlikely messengers before. A donkey, a burning bush, a foreign king. And it is not beneath heaven to use a laboratory discovery to finish preparing you for a window that was decided long before that laboratory existed. Before we go there, though, I want to give you the second reframe. The first one covered your body and your instincts, and this one covers your divine identity. You have spent years being the one who holds everything together, the one people call at midnight, the one who remembers birthdays no one else remembers, who shows up with care when someone is sick, who forgives quickly because holding a grudge felt heavier than letting go. That version of you has been called too sensitive, too much, too soft for a world that rewards people who do not feel things as deeply as you do. Somewhere along the way, you may have started to believe them. You may have started shrinking, softening your instincts, apologizing for needing quiet, explaining yourself to people who were never going to understand, no matter how carefully you explained it. I need you to hear this clearly, my beloved sons and daughters of Canada. Your gentleness was never a weakness that needed fixing. It was never the ceiling on what you could become. It was the foundation the rest of your heavenly assignment was going to be built on. And no one told you that, because the people around you did not have the language for it. They saw softness. Heaven saw a receiver capable of holding weight that harder people would have dropped a long time ago. This is why the isolation you have felt across your life does not mean you did something wrong. It means the room you were standing in was too shallow for what is forming in you. Heaven does not usually explain that in the moment. It simply moves you quietly, sometimes painfully, out of rooms and relationships that could not carry the next version of who you are becoming. And it does that right before it hands you an assignment. Those old rooms could never have understood anyway. So here is where we stand right now, from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic shores. Before we go any further into what was discovered outside traditional walls, know this: you are not broken. You are not falling behind people who seem to have it more together than you. You are being repositioned deliberately on a timeline you did not choose, but were always destined to walk. And that timeline arrives at its next major marker in a matter of days. If any part of what I just said landed somewhere specific in your chest, place your hand there for a moment. Not for show, just to acknowledge it privately between you and heaven listening on the other side of this. That small physical act matters more than it looks like it does, and we are going to build on exactly this foundation as we move into what comes next. Think for a moment about David before he was crowned, spending years in caves and wilderness while a jealous king hunted him. He was already anointed. The oil had already been poured over his head by the prophet Samuel. But anointing and coronation are not the same event, and there was a long, lonely gap between them that David did not choose and could not shorten by wanting it to move faster. That gap was not punishment, it was formation. It taught him how to lead men who had nothing, how to wait without becoming bitter, how to spare the life of an enemy when revenge was sitting right there for the taking. Every year in that wilderness built something in him that the throne alone never could have built. If your last season has felt like a desolate wilderness or a silent cave, Canada, it was never about being forgotten. It was about becoming someone who could actually carry what is coming. You are closer to your own version of that throne than the exhaustion has let you believe. And the strange thing about appointed windows is that they tend to arrive exactly when the person walking into them has finally stopped demanding an explanation for the wait and started simply becoming ready for what follows it. That is where you are right now. Whether you fully recognize it or not, the waiting is nearly finished. What comes next requires you present, clear-headed, and undistracted, which is exactly why I need to walk you through something most spiritual teaching never mentions, something happening in your actual brain that has been working against the very clarity this window requires from you. Now I want to pause and hold something in front of you before we continue, because it matters more than it will seem to at first. Over the past several years, something has been discovered in research laboratories that most people across this land who care about the spiritual realm have never been told about. Not because it contradicts what is sacred, but because it came from a direction most spiritually minded believers are not usually watching. A small group of neuroscientists, led by a physician who has spent decades studying how the brain functions at its highest capacity, found something about the way the human mind is designed. It explains a feeling most spiritually sensitive people carry, but have never quite been able to put into words. Something so fundamental that it traces back to a Nobel Prize-winning discovery, yet so simple in its practical application that it almost sounds too easy when you first hear it described. I am going to tell you exactly what they found later in this message, once you have everything else you need to understand why it matters for these specific 3 days. But right now, my chosen ones of the true north, I want you to hold one question quietly in the back of your mind as we continue. What if the fog you have been feeling, the mental heaviness, the difficulty focusing during prayer, the sense that your mind used to move faster than it does now, was never a sign of spiritual failure at all? What if something measurable was simply taken from you along the way, and what if it can be given back? Hold that question. Do not answer it yet. We are going to come back to it. And when we do, the answer is going to connect directly to what these 3 days require of you. Because a foggy, exhausted mind and a clear, sharpened one will not experience August 20th, 21st, and 22nd in remotely the same way. While you hold that question, let me tell you something about why these particular days carry the weight they do. Because you who walk on Canadian soil deserve more than being told to trust me blindly. Late August has always been a hinge point on the spiritual calendar, even if modern life has trained us to stop noticing it. It sits at the exact seam between the exhausting stretch of summer and the sharper, more focused season that follows it. Throughout Scripture, the turning of a season was never treated as background scenery. It was treated as a signal. The harvest was gathered at a specific time, not whenever it felt convenient. Feasts were kept on appointed days, not chosen days. Even Elijah, after the driest, most exhausting stretch of his ministry, was told to watch a very particular sky for a very particular cloud, no bigger than a hand, because the timing of the rain mattered as much as the rain itself. Late August operates the same way. Now is the point where the old season has fully drained itself out, and the new one has not yet hardened into its final shape, which makes it unusually soft, unusually responsive to whatever is spoken or decided within it. That is not superstition. That is a pattern that repeats across Scripture and across the corpus of testimonies heaven has been building through people exactly like you for a very long time. Stack that seasonal shift on top of everything your body and spirit have been signaling for weeks. The waking at 3 in the morning under the northern skies, the pulling away from shallow rooms, the exhaustion that will not lift no matter how much you rest, and you get a convergence. 3 separate threads meeting at the same 3 days. That kind of stacking does not happen every month. It will not happen again in exactly this configuration for a long time. There are 3 elements lining up this week, and each one on its own would be worth paying attention to, but together they form something that has not lined up quite this way in years. The first element is the seasonal shift I already described, the hinge between the draining stretch of summer and the sharper season ahead. The second element is personal, and it belongs entirely to you, my beloved of Canada. It is the specific cycle of waking, exhaustion, and isolation you have been walking through, a cycle that typically lasts somewhere between 6 and 10 weeks before it resolves into either collapse or breakthrough. You are currently at the exact point in that cycle where it tips one direction or the other. The third element is the one most people miss entirely, because it requires looking back instead of forward. Whatever door closed for you earlier this year, a relationship that ended, an opportunity that fell through, a plan that collapsed for reasons you never fully understood, that closing was not the end of the story. It was the clearing of space. Closed doors are rarely permanent in isolation. They are usually the first half of a 2-part sentence, and August 20th, 21st, and 22nd are shaping up to be the second half. When those 3 elements, the seasonal hinge, your personal cycle, and the earlier closed door, all converge on the same handful of days, that is not coincidence stacked on coincidence. Canada, my chosen nation of the North, that is what heaven calls an appointed time, a kairos moment, distinct from the ordinary passage of calendar days. I am not telling you this to make you anxious. I am telling you this because a mind still fogged by ordinary exhaustion is not going to experience takeoff the same way a mind restored to full clarity will experience it. And I do not want that difference to cost you anything this week. Think about Esther for a moment, because her story carries the same shape we are looking at here. She did not choose the timing of the crisis that placed her in front of the king. She did not choose the exact day Mordecai sent word asking her to risk everything. The window had already been decided by forces far outside her control, and all she was given was a choice about whether to walk through it awake or shrink back and hope someone else would. For such a time as this. That phrase has been quoted so often it can lose its weight. But sit with what it actually means. Mordecai was not offering Esther a suggestion. He was naming a convergence, the same kind of convergence we have been tracing through your own life, and telling her plainly that her entire existence up to that point had been arranging itself toward one specific window she could not reschedule. You are standing in a similar position right now, children of the maple leaf. Even if the stakes look different on the surface, nobody is asking you to walk into an ancient throne room uninvited. But you are being asked to walk into these 3 days awake, clear, and present, instead of foggy, exhausted, and half distracted, the way the enemy has been working overtime to keep you. That difference, awake versus asleep, clear versus foggy, is not a small detail. It is the entire hinge this message has been building toward. So let me close the loop I opened a few minutes ago about the fog, because I promised you an answer, and you have earned it by staying this long. What was discovered in that laboratory has nothing to do with luck, chakras, or vague energy talk. It has to do with something concrete happening inside your actual brain, something that has a name, a mechanism, and now finally a way to restore what was quietly lost. Here is the shape of it. Your brain has 2 hemispheres, left and right, and they were designed from birth to operate in a synchronized state, working together rather than competing against each other. Children operate in that synchronized state almost by default. It is part of why young children access creativity, focus, and intuition so effortlessly without trying, without training, without needing anyone to teach them how. Somewhere along the way to adulthood, for almost everyone across Canada, that synchronization degrades, not because of spiritual failure, weak faith, or insufficient discipline, but because of stress, screens, sleep disruption, and decades of a nervous system running in survival mode rather than rest mode. The hemispheres drift out of sync, and the fog you have been feeling, the difficulty focusing during prayer, the sense that your discernment used to feel sharper than it does now, is very often exactly that drift showing up in your daily experience. The research behind this traces back to a Nobel Prize-winning discovery from Dr. Roger Sperry, who spent years studying what happens when the two hemispheres of the brain are examined independently of each other. His findings became the foundation for work exploring how synchronization between the hemispheres can actually be restored deliberately through mechanisms built into the brain itself. The fog was never a permanent sentence, my beloved sons and daughters of Canada. It was a solvable condition, and the solution has been sitting closer than you realized. I know science and scripture are not usually handed to you in the same breath, and I understand if part of you wants to resist blending them. But consider this. Heaven has never been afraid of using the physical world to accomplish spiritual purposes. A staff became a serpent, water became wine, clay and spit restored sight to a blind man when a spoken word alone would have worked just as easily. If heaven has used ordinary physical matter to carry out extraordinary purposes before, a scientific breakthrough is not somehow beneath that pattern. It fits it. What matters right now is not whether this sounds unusual to you. What matters is whether your mind walks into August 20th, 21st, and 22nd sharp, clear, and present, or foggy, tired, and half a step behind where it needs to be. Let me tell you plainly and completely what this restoration actually is. A team of neuroscientists spent years taking over an hour of clinical neural sync protocols and compressed it into an 8-minute targeted auditory sequence. 8 minutes a day, headphones on, eyes closed. That is the entirety of the physical requirement. They call it the Genius Switch. It is not a meditation app or a temporary mood track. It is an auditory sequence engineered specifically based on Nobel Prize research to reconnect the two hemispheres and restore the whole brain synchronization that was your default state before life eroded it. Thousands of everyday people have already gone through this restoration. Ordinary believers across the land, carrying ordinary versions of the exact exhaustion and fog we have addressed, who decided 8 minutes a day was a small enough commitment to test against a very large calling. The Genius Switch is for the chosen one, who understands that heaven prepares not only the promise, but the mind that has to walk into it. The person who has felt the call clearly, and who is finally willing to stop treating the mental fog as a permanent flaw and start treating it as something solvable. My chosen ones of the true north, this does not give you your divine identity. It simply removes the static that has kept you from operating inside it at full strength. A synchronized mind walking into August 20th, 21st, and 22nd receives differently than a foggy one does. Colleagues who reviewed this technology suggested it would be incredible value even at $500. In-person clinical sessions commonly run hundreds of dollars per hour, and clinical devices cost thousands. Yet it was released for just $39 with lifetime access, a single payment, backed by an unconditional guarantee, alongside supportive guides for clarity and focus. The link below this message is where this verified tool is made available. But remember this, you who dwell from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The tool does not replace heaven, and it does not replace obedience. What heaven is doing in your life is not conditional on any purchase. A restored instrument simply gives what heaven is doing a clear place to land. Now, let us walk through the 3 days themselves, one at a time, starting with August 20th. August 20th is the opening day. Think of it like a door being unlocked quietly without fanfare, early in the morning before most of the world is awake. On this day, there are 3 simple things I want you to do. In the morning, before you check your phone, before the noise of the world sets the tone, sit in silence for a few minutes. Notice what is present in your spirit before the opinions of others crowd in. This is choosing stillness on purpose. In the afternoon of the 20th, find one relationship or situation you have been avoiding out of discomfort and send one honest message. It only needs to be sincere. A small act of courage that matches the courage this entire window requires. In the evening of the 20th, before you sleep, speak one sentence out loud under the northern sky. I am awake for what is coming, and I will not sleep through my appointed time. August 21st is the hinge day, the center of the window where the real spiritual weight sits. In the morning, write down the one closed door from this past year that hurt the most, and next to it write, cleared for what is next. In the afternoon of the 21st, give something away quietly, an act of intentional generosity without seeking credit, breaking the spirit of lack and fear. In the evening, spend 10 minutes in total darkness and silence, dedicating your life, your gifts, and your family line anew to heaven's purpose. August 22nd is the day of seal and release. In the morning, step outside, plant your feet firmly on Canadian soil, take 3 deep breaths, and declare out loud that you receive the strength, clarity, and authority being returned to you. In the afternoon, establish one healthy boundary you have delayed setting, stepping fully into the precision heaven has cultivated in you. In the evening of the 22nd, as the window closes, speak your gratitude aloud. Thank heaven that the wilderness season is over and the new threshold has been crossed. Children of the maple leaf, you are not walking into these 3 days as someone begging for rescue. You are walking in as a faithful watchman who has stood post through the long night, now stepping into the light of divine appointment. My beloved sons and daughters of Canada, if this message has touched your soul, subscribe to this channel right now so you do not miss the next urgent word from Archangel Michael. Share this message across our vast land with every Canadian who needs to awaken to their divine calling today.